This is TUM TV with the TUM Minutes. Today in studio, Emine Arman. Today we have on the talk the impact of Corona, recession and crises on organizations, work and working together in organizations.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TUM Minutes. From strict lockdown to devastating loss of life and livelihood, we are experiencing one of the most important events in the 21st century. While COVID-19 has taken over our entire lives in the past months, perhaps one of its most salient aspects is its impact on our livelihood and the survival of our organizations. There have been several reports on many organizations which have had to close down as they face devastating effects of COVID-19. However, some organizations have rather thrived during these times, and this has raised the debate on which kind of organizations survive or fail under the crisis and how these situations happen. A few questions to consider in this segment are:
what is the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on organizations? What do organizations need to do to adapt and survive? Why is it hard for organizations to adapt? How do organizations make decisions in times of crises? How do organizations learn in a crisis? How do we work together in and after the COVID-19 crisis? How to prepare for the next crisis?
In the past, we have faced many cases which led to crises in organizations. There are natural disasters, accidents and technological disasters, malevolence, rumors and fake news, economic crisis, just to name a few. And now we are face to face with a pandemic crisis. But let me tell you this, the world experienced similar crises in the past as well, like SARS, MERS and the Spanish flu. So a pandemic is not as rare as many of us might think. What is the impact of COVID-19 crisis on organizations? To answer this question, World Economic Forum economist Naana Ankuma reports live from Cologne, Switzerland. Hello, Naana.
Hello, Emily.
I hope you're having a good day. Let us get straight into it. How can and do organizations measure the impact COVID-19 has on them?
Thank you. In order to measure the impact COVID-19 has on organizations, scientists developed an impact likelihood matrix, and we also call it a risk matrix. Now, the x-axis shows the likelihood occurrence, and the y-axis gives us information about how an event has an impact on individuals, organizations, or societies. When we are looking at the risk matrix from the Global Risk Report of 2019, we see that the spread of infectious diseases had a possibility to occur, but the likelihood was very below average, and that is why many organizations did not take it seriously. Now, according to this matrix, we expected more extreme weather conditions in 2019 than any other kind of event.
So you're basically saying we were just not careful enough?
My answer to that, for those who thought that such a pandemic can never happen, is yes. We were not careful and we did not think about the possibilities.
Okay, so Naana, COVID-19 is called a black swan by many people. And as you know, a black swan is when a surprising event with a very low probability occurs, which carries an extreme impact. Naana, would you also call the pandemic a black swan?
Absolutely not. The pandemic is not a black swan. We experienced many crises before, and the likelihood occurrence of this pandemic was there. We just didn't consider it to actually happen.
I see. Thank you very much, Naana. Stay healthy. So adaptation is a very important factor during a crisis. Organizations need to learn to adapt in order to survive. But how is adaptation done and which steps need to be considered? With COVID-19, we are experiencing the greatest sufferings in the business world since World War II. Back in March, economics researchers concluded that Germany's economy suffered losses of hundreds of billions of euros due to COVID-19. Vapiano, the famous Cologne-based restaurant chain in Germany, has been driven into insolvency due to the corona crisis. The Galeria Kaufhof department store chain was already facing significant challenges before the corona crisis, and the crisis has accelerated the procedure. And so they had to file for insolvency. The already struggling fashion group Esprit had to close down several stores during the corona crisis. Worldwide examples are Hertz, a Florida-based car rental company, and Gold's Gym, a Texas-based fitness chain, which was brought out of bankruptcy by the Berlin-based make-fit chain owner. Why are these firms going bankrupt? What are they doing wrong? We connect to Abigail Smith. Hello, Abigail. What are the rules for adaptation and what needs to be done?
Hello, M&A. First of all, there are three basic principles of crisis which organizations should always keep in mind: prevention, detection, and response. If organizations acknowledge these principles, threats of crisis can be mitigated. And in times of corona, what matters most is the proximity of location and time. Now, since the virus is being transmitted from one person to another, we have to keep as few people as possible at one specific location at one specific time.
So you're saying organizations need to reorganize their concepts?
Yes, more or less. There are some organizations which successfully manage this whole situation, some that need to adopt in order to survive, and then there are also some which basically have no way of changing. Now, these businesses are divided into 4 modules. We have the danger zone, where there is low time and location independence, such as dine-in restaurants, sports events, concerts, and passenger airlines. Now, these businesses suffered the most from this crisis. Secondly, we have the high survival probability with high time independence and low location independence. Examples here can be self-service retail and independent nature tourism. There is also high location probability with low time independence and high location independence, like live streaming, delivery restaurants, and telemedicine. Here we have many people at one time, but in different locations. And then there are the crisis stars. Firms in this category are the ones which mastered COVID-19. Here we have high time and location independence. Examples can be streaming services, online retail, remote work service providers.
One organization that can be classified within the danger zone group is Thomas Cook Aviation. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020, the German charter airline Condor terminated its contracts with the Thomas Cook Aviation prematurely. Since Condor was the only customer of Thomas Cook Aviation, the airline also had to file for insolvency in April 2020. The streaming industry is one of the big beneficiaries of the corona crisis. The market leader Netflix was able to gain 26 million new subscribers in the first half of 2020. Approximately 10.1 million of these subscribers were gained in the second quarter. In comparison, in the second quarter of 2019, the number of new customers was only at approximately 2.7 million. Every second person in Germany now regularly uses a streaming subscription. Apart from the first mover Netflix, people are also regularly using streaming platforms just like Disney+, Amazon Prime, etc.
Thank you very much, Abigail. Today in the studio we have a very special guest, Lily Fan, a management and technology student who wrote her master's thesis about how an organization manage crisis situations. Hello Lily, how are you doing?
Hello, Aminat. I'm doing very fine, thank you.
Lily, could you please explain to us the hardships organizations face while adapting?
Yes, of course. Adaptability is very much dependent on the type of organization. In a structured organization, information is mostly only accessible to a handful of people at the top of a hierarchy. Some organizations regard failure as weakness and therefore try to hide it. Usually, decisions in an organization are taken by the top management, and employees are bound to just implement them. There is no flexibility in organizations where the system is rigid. It is generally impossible to adapt to the situation of a crisis.
So how do organizations need to make decisions in time of crisis? Lily, can you please tell us which steps organizations need to consider for their survival?
There are 4 main principles of decision-making in times of crisis. During a crisis, there's normally little information, and so decision-making should not only necessarily include the top management and should not follow their hierarchy. The first principle is to reflect. Organizations should reflect on their past actions and should make a rational decision. Failing to reflect can cause irreversible problems. Secondly, there is the principle of least worst option. Managers should avoid at all cost decision inertia, not making a decision because all options look bad. No, not to do that. When organizations are in a situation where all options are bad, they should always choose the one which has the least worst outcome. Making a decision is always better than making no decision at all. The third principle is the one of safeguarding. Decision makers should set an example for the team. Negative emotions are contagious, especially in times of crisis. Decision makers should recognize the emotions of their team members and act accordingly. They have to keep the mood of the team up in order to receive positive outcomes. And last but not least, there is the principle of focus on the goal. The decision is not as important as the goal. Decision makers need to improvise at some point of the time and need to know to break some rules in the midst of a crisis. Crises are extraordinary events. Doing everything according to plan can be fatal.
We have found about how organizations need to adapt and how decision-making should take place. So now, for future events, how do organizations learn in time of a crisis?
There are 4 types of learning: transformative, focusing, reinterpretative, and transitory. These types of learning take place according to the potential impact and relevance of an event is on the organization. The potential impact is whether the organization has the motivation to make adjustments, and the potential relevance is the influence an event has on the organization. Transformative is when both are high. The organization is motivated to make change and the event influences the organization's learning. A current example for transformative is the change from traditional classes to Zoom sessions, from analog to digital. Transitory is when both impact and relevance are low. We have transitory learning after World War II, where there were many financial crises. Reinterpretative is when the impact is low, but the relevance is high. Events do not have a high impact on the organization, but still it concerns the organization. Mercedes-Benz invented its famous ESP system with reinterpretative learning. Lastly, focusing has high impact but low relevance. Nuclear explosion, for example, lead organizations to turn fast in the focus of this disaster and learn how to prevent the next time.
During the COVID-19 crisis, employees and students got used to working from home. Students by tuning into online sessions and employees by making use of home office. The question which arises now is, will we go back to things how they used to be, or will we keep this newly, forcefully developed system? Which jobs can keep this up and which jobs are bound to disappear? Will the default be changed, or will we keep our initial default?
Crises happened in the past. We are now in the middle of one, so there's no guarantee that there will not be one in the future again. Preparation today will help us tomorrow. The most important rule for organizations is to continuously adapt and develop. The future is digital, so we must think digital. Organizations should invest in digitalization. New and fresh brains are always able to think deeper and more complex. Companies should learn from startups. Adaptation barriers need to be removed from the organization. Transparency needs to be increased. Who knows, maybe the newest employed intern has the solution to one problem. Crisis situations need to be practiced. Organizations need to simulate different crises so to have better reactions when facing real crises. Organizations need to make use of outside sources. Companies can co-develop with open source users.
What is most important is to constantly and continuously adapt. Never stop adapting. This has been 2 Minutes. Thank you for watching. I am Emina Arman. Have a great evening.